Hey guys, this is Greg Porter here with Does It Serve You? I'm sitting here with Dr. Shawn Baker, CEO of MeatRx, and we're going to have a conversation today, probably about a few different things. I'm excited to have him here. And if you don't know who he is already, a quick YouTube search, you would find out real quick. He is what I would dub the carnivore diet royalty. He's outspoken. He's got a band of haters, and that's kind of how he and I connected. And he's graciously accepted to spend some time with us here today. You can check out his background. It's polarizing. It's a big piece of steak. So I appreciate him being here, and I hope you guys enjoy this tonight. And so, how you doing? How's today? What's the weather like where you are? Let's jump into this.
Well, I'm doing well. The weather is currently like about 75 degrees and sunny. I'm sitting here in Southern California, so life is generally pretty good. I generally work from home most days, and so, being at home is kind of natural for me, or has been for the last year or two. And so I just kind of business as usual for me. So everything's good.
That's funny that my people are like talking about how I said, well, the kids missed out on so much, like going to the movies and stuff. They're like, well, I don't think they're missing out on anything. And I was like, well, they are. They're actually missing out on more than I am, because they're used to me being home, working from home. They're used to, we have a farm, and I run a marketing business, and I do most stuff from home. The kids don't notice a change there, besides they're not going to school and they don't get to go do their things. So it's impacting them more than it is impacting me. I'm just saving gas money. But yeah, so when you started the Carnivore, your position Carnivore, and there's lots of people, if you want to search it out, you can see his journey. He's done countless interviews on this. But what I want to ask you is, being a doctor at the very start of this, how scary was it to put yourself out there when you were seeing results? Just because you are a doctor and it's so against the grain of what we've been bred to stand about the diet.
Yeah, it wasn't really scary to put it out there at all. I mean, I didn't really hesitate. I wasn't even worried too much about it. I didn't really think it was that big of a deal, quite honestly, because I mean, there's been people that have been eating this way for millennia in other parts of the world. I just don't find it to be that particularly unusual in the overall perspective of the human experience. And so I wasn't really worried about putting that out there, even as a physician. I realized that that's not the mainstream nutrition advice. But I mean, as a doctor, I mean, we don't really have any nutrition training. We don't have any nutrition knowledge. I mean, physicians aren't the place you go to get your nutrition advice. It shouldn't be. I mean, if you're expecting your physician to give you good nutrition advice, I mean, you're just as likely to get it from your hairstylist or your plumber. I mean, from the amount of education we have. I mean, I say that a little bit tongue in cheek, but I mean, there's not much, there's quite a bit of truth in that statement. And so, I had a lot of fun with it, quite honestly. I mean, when I did this 30-day carnivore diet, and I was a little bit on social media, and there were some people kind of following it, and we just kind of laughed along and said, yeah, you're going to have a heart attack because your arteries are going to clog up. You're going to get scurvy, and your gut's going to fall out from a microbiome revolt and all that stuff. We just kind of kidded around. And, I think that was fun. And then when I decided to keep doing it about 6 months in, and I started sort of saying, seriously, I mean, this seems to be pretty effective. Does anyone else want to try it? And I mean, we had hundreds and hundreds of people that said, yeah, we'd do it for 90 days and just track results. And so we started tracking the results. And then that's where it sort of got contentious. And that's where people started getting angry about it. And, and I attracted the attention of guys like Joe Rogan, and typically went on his podcast. And then of course, once you do that, it's kind of like you get in the spotlight. And then I had, every vegan on the planet, start, calling me the devil and evil and trying to, just generally, sort of paint me in a negative light. And, my intention was just, hey, this seems to work and help people. And that's still my, kind of the reason I'm doing what I'm doing. And I think arguably, we've seen that to the tune of tens of thousands of people that have done this and growing every day. And so it's, so it wasn't really scary at all for me, but it's been interesting to see the pushback that we've seen from some people, It's interesting to see the lack of curiosity on some people's part, and the willingness just to out of hand, it's dismiss it and say, well, it doesn't match what we believe about nutrition, and therefore it can't be true. And it's kind of like I liken it to someone, looking outside and looking at the sky, and I go and look how blue the sky is, and they say, no, 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 this sky's actually red because I've got a study that says the sky is supposed to be red. And you're looking at what is obviously a blue sky. It's clearly red because that's what the studies say. And it's just kind of that level of, unwillingness to, see what's right in front of their face. So that's been it's more shocking than scary, I think.
That seems to be a huge issue in the marketplace, social media, everywhere right now, is that people will go against a lot of things just because different people are saying it, or it's been ingrained into our mind for so long, that like even with what's going on now in the world, it's people are really, if they're stuck in one way, they don't want to hear the other option until it's too late. A lot of times people are more willing to do things and adapt to changes, and be a little bit more curious, but it's usually way too late. The thing about when I started was the blood work was a concern. And then I was doing more research and looking at it. And actually, I spent 8 months arguing with somebody about it, because I was coming from being a vegan. And I was like, well, what about the blood work? What about the blood work? And can you just, some of the markers on the blood work might show higher cholesterol than someone on a vegan diet, a higher testosterone and all that. And like, why shouldn't someone be worried about that? Do you have anything to offer there? Like, I mean, should we disregard a lot of the stuff that we've been panicking about for many years, like when it comes to cholesterol?
Well, I mean, labs in general. I mean, we need to talk about, the clinical context of what a particular lab value means. I mean, we have much better ways to assess disease rather than risk. A elevated cholesterol is certainly a risk marker in much of the population. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be a significant risk marker for every single person, and risk does not equate to disease. Men are at higher risk for dying earlier than women. Doesn't mean as a man you are going to die earlier than a woman. And you can't really change the fact that you're a man. Well, I mean, I guess you could identify as something else or change it. But I mean, in general, you get my point. So, I mean, what I like to look at, which I think is more helpful, is, when we're talking about cardiovascular disease, look at actual disease and look at like things like the coronary artery calcium scan, look at carotid intermediate thickness testing, look at your cardiac capacity. I mean, those things are probably, particularly as we get older, more reflective of what's going on in the heart than what the day-to-day variability on your cholesterol might be. Remember, these lab tests reflect what's flowing in the blood at that particular second, and they change fairly dynamically. Dave Feldman has demonstrated quite nicely that, your cholesterol can change by 25, 50, 100 points. We're talking the US units, milligrams per deciliter in a matter of a couple of days. And so when we look at we get our labs drawn once a year, and it's like, oh my gosh, it could have been that if you didn't do it on Tuesday, but you did it on Friday, you would have had a very different result. And so making huge decisions based on a single lab test or even a series of lab tests can be problematic in that regard. So I think, we have to put in overall risk, the breadth of information we could have available to us. And that includes things like inflammatory markers, glycemic control, insulin levels, blood pressure, visceral fat levels, all these things that in combination will give us some degree of, likelihood of developing X or Y disease. And again, even that's still somewhat speculative, and it's still better to say, hey, what's my heart look like today with one of these advanced imaging tests? And then you can say, well, there's nothing there. So whatever you've been doing for the last, 10 years, 20 years, arguably has not caused disease. You probably can continue doing that in many cases without that. And again, it depends on how old you are. So it's just more subtle and more nuanced than people want to make it. And, so you can like, I get people send me their labs all the time. They say, well, what about this? And I'm like, I have no idea. I don't know anything about you. I don't know how old you are, what you weigh, what's going
What your
on.
history is.
Yeah, you show me a blank set of lab paper and it could mean anything. I mean, there's very few labs, particularly when it comes to chronic disease, where I would say, wow, that's definitely, gonna be horrible for you. I mean, there's a few exceptions to that, but in general, most people are talking about numbers within a normal range or something slightly outside the ranges. And is it a big deal or not? I'm not convinced it is in all people.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean those ranges at the end of the day were set forth probably well before a lot of more data has been given. Like, I feel like we're just tapping into, and I think we're still in the beginning stages on nutrition and the effects of that. I think there's been a lot of greed and a lot of corporation efforts put into a lot of the narrative that we have and the propaganda that we get, and I believe that really there's a lot of money spent to quiet people like you. I think that's. Have you ever been shuttered on social media? Do you ever feel like your algorithm is not reaching like some other people's? Like, you feel like someone's quieting you down? I mean, you have a huge following on Instagram, and you got millions of views on YouTube. Do you feel like someone's?
Yeah, I mean, I do sometimes see that, like, it seems like, there's traffic directed away or, demonetized for certain topics. And, I do think there is an effort, and we see that more and more. It's becoming more and more obvious with other people that just get completely deplatformed, and more sort of, if you don't sort of toe the party line and agree with whoever, then we're going to, drive traffic away from you. I do see that's happening. I think it certainly is. That's one of the reasons, we started this MeatRx platform, which is, again, designed for people that are happy to eat meat and want to continue to eat meat and have a place to socialize and discuss, topics, whether they're fun topics or scientific topics. And so, yeah, I do think that's occurring. It's occurring on most of the social media platforms, and it's, it depends on the topic. Obviously there's some political stuff that's happened too. There's some stuff in the scientific community. We see this with the coronavirus. People are being told that they don't say exactly what, say, the CDC or somebody else is saying, then their posts may be removed, or they may be kicked off social media and things like that. So it's definitely happening. I mean, it's a kind of a soft censorship, but I mean, it's still kind of a censorship.
Yeah, I think that you're right. It's happening big time now. I noticed people with followers of 200 to 300 people on Facebook alone making certain posts due to COVID-19. Their posts, they were like, I can still see it, but nobody else can. And so it's like they're throttling them, but still letting them feel like that they got their message out there. And it was happening too much for it to be a coincidence. And I feel like, as anyone has any opposing belief than what anyone wants, I feel like we're running towards a serious issue at a high rate. Freedom of speech is not real anymore, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, some people argue, well, this isn't a government agency. I mean, these these big social media things are, independent private companies that are, technologies, and they don't have to abide by freedom of speech rules. And there may be some truth to that. So that is something that does, however, impact a lot of people. I mean, the messages that people get, this is the way we communicate these days. I mean, many people get most of their information from social media, which is, for good or bad, that's the reality of the situation. And when that's being censored, or the message is being sort of shaped a certain way, then and this is no new thing. I mean, corporations have been buying TV ads for decades on TV programming. The programmer reflects the advertiser's desire, whether they put product placement in the movies or on their in their shows, or the messages they have are not meant to conflict with their advertisers' desires. I mean, that's been going on forever. So it's it's the same old thing, I think. I mean, it's just a little more, maybe more aggressive than it's been in the past.
Yeah. Yeah. You are 52?
53.
53? So you're 53 years old. You work out a lot. You have some world records. You played high level pro rugby in New Zealand, and like you're an athlete. You're 100% an athlete. You are still an active athlete. I think you hit that concept two rower about 3,000 meters longer than I do, and that might be in a 3,000 meter run. But that you don't stop. And do you attribute that? Do you feel better now over the last 3 years of being on this diet, stronger than you did before? Do you notice anything different, or are you maintaining? Or are you making gains still that you're
Yeah,
losing?
I mean, I am literally probably in arguably my life, or at least in the last several decades, and you know, and I've trained at a high level for most of my life. Yeah, diet does play a huge role in this. My recovery, is excellent, my capacity to train hard, you know, almost pretty much every day is great. I don't feel beat up. I don't feel sore. I don't have to dial back my intensity at all, as because I'm older. I mean, you always hear that older guys can't train hard. I train hard every day. You know, I train as hard as I did when 20, 30 years ago. So, I mean, you know, I think diet has helped, because 5 years ago, I couldn't do what I'm doing now. You know, and I'm doing it now at you know, at an older age, and I'm actually, yeah, I've put on strength. I've put on speed, you know, after 50 more than I was in my 40s, which I think is pretty good. And you know, my body composition, you know, is probably the best it's been in my life right now. And so it's, you know, that's all, you know, mostly due down to diet. I mean, I still train. I mean, you can't just not train, but I mean, that hasn't changed. That part has never changed. I've been training hard for 40 years now, and I'm not planning on stopping anytime soon. So and it's part of a, you know, there's probably a little bit of mental illness that goes with this, you know, you kind of the craziness to keep wanting to do it. But I thoroughly enjoy it, and I'm
You're
having a
addicted to the
blast.
pain.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's a little bit of pain. I mean, it's, you know, some days are better than others. You know, some days like you kind of just get in there and it's like, wow, you kind of question your own sanity some days. But for the most part, you know, I'm happy and doing well.
Take us through a day with Shawn Baker. Like, how does your day start? What time does it start on average? To what kind of workouts are you doing? Like, share. There's a lot of people watching this that just they really want to play at that level that you're playing at, and they want to skip the 40 years that you put into the training.
Yeah, I mean, well, obviously the base is there, you know, so I've got 40 years of base behind me for strength and muscle accumulation and so on and so forth. But I mean, you know, you know, like, I mean, currently, as I'm actually trying to get a little bit leaner, and so I've kind of changed things a little bit, and this is over the last month or so. And so, I mean, I'm, you know, usually get up, you know, 5, 6 o'clock in the morning. I wake up on my own and walk the dogs. I do usually have a meeting in the morning, a couple of meetings, you know, online virtual meetings, and then I usually try to do some sort of conditioning workout, you know, whether it's rowing on the rowing machine, or, you know, swinging some kettlebells, or, you know, running sprints or on the treadmill, or bike sprints or something, you know, I do that. And then I usually will have um, food, you know, it's usually 3 pounds of meat or something like that of some sort, about 300 grams of protein. And then I'll go back to do some more meetings. And then usually in the afternoon, if I get another chance, if the opportunity presents itself, I'll do another workout. And it's usually more of a strength-based workout. You know, it might be, you know, deadlifting or squatting or pull-ups, you know, working on some of this kind of CrossFit specific stuff, which I'm trying to play with right now. Then I usually have a little bit more work I do. And then I usually, you know, it's usually time for me to hang out with the family, and I'm usually cooking dinner for the family. Most of my family's pretty much carnivorous, so I'm usually cooking steaks. And depending on the day, sometimes I'll eat them with them, sometimes I won't. Like right now, more often than not, because I'm leaning out, I'm not eating dinner, and that's a little tough because I'm cooking all these great steaks and like I'm not going to eat them. You know? But you know, and then I usually go to bed somewhere, you know, 9 to usually 10 o'clock or so. And then I fall asleep almost instantaneously. And usually I sleep for the most part pretty well through the night, sleep through, wake up and, you know, go do it again.
So, being an athlete and being a CEO, it's very important to have goals and targets. What are you training for? Is there something you want to
Yeah.
accomplish?
So right now, so like I said, I've, you know, so over the years, you know, I said I had that time playing high level rugby, and then I switched into powerlifting where I set some American records as a drug-free deadlifter. And then I went into strongman and I competed at a national level at strongman. And then after that, I got into, was a competitive throwing where I was throwing Highland Games and I won a world championship in the Highland Games. And then I did a little bit of track and field and I was all American in discus and weight and super weight. And then I kind of made this shift from being a big, huge guy, you know, strength-based athlete to more this rowing type thing. So I kind of leaned out a little bit for that. And then I set, you know, 6 American records, 3 world records on that particular thing, won a world championship. And so now, and I've been doing that for about 6 or 7 years. And so now I'm kind of at this sort of crossroads where I'm like, I kind of did everything I wanted to do in that sport. Now I need a new challenge. And so I for some probably ill-advised reason, I've decided I'm going to try to throw my hat in the ring with some of the CrossFit stuff because I'm 53 and I'm targeting, you know, when I turn 55, maybe competing in the CrossFit Games as a 55 plus athlete because I think
I was going to ask.
yeah, I think it'll take me about 2 years to develop the skills necessary to compete at that high level. I mean, I've got a lot of, you know, a lot of tools already in the toolbox, but there's things I'm very extremely weak at. And being 6'5" is not really ideal for that sport. I mean, it's just not. So I'm going to push to see what I can do and to see if I can, you know, on willpower and desire and horsepower, you know, compete at a high level. I think it's possible. I don't know. Maybe I'll get 6 months into it and say, you know, it's not for me. But I'm still maybe a month into this, and I'm having a lot of fun. It's kind of interesting because I have a lot of weaknesses, and you know, as good of an athlete as I've been and strong and the strengths I've had in certain areas, I've got other areas where I'm extremely weak. You know, some of the gymnastic stuff, some of the, you know, things that where long arms is not a benefit. I'm finding that I got a ways to go on those things. And so my goal right now, you know, and the fun part is you go from really just sucking to not sucking so bad to maybe being mediocre to maybe being, you know, halfway decent. So I'm climbing that ladder right now, and it's motivating because with rowing, I mean, I might have to put in 3 months of work to get 0.2 of a second faster, and now I mean I go from being able to do 1 rep of something to be able to do 10 reps of something in 2 weeks. So
Yeah, you're seeing huge gains
yeah, you
because
see,
it's a whole new world.
yeah, exactly, and that's fun. It keeps you motivated. So that's what I'm currently training at. Well, like I said, check it out in 2022 if I'm at the CrossFit Games, and if that's doable, we'll see. I kind of think it is, but I mean, I would be an anomaly, particularly if for someone that could potentially win it to be my size, and so part of that is when I was because I started at 240, which I think is about 20 pounds too heavy to compete. So I'm trying to, like I said, that's one of the reasons I've kind of shifted to a leaner approach on my diet right now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the I love watching the CrossFit Games, and I wish I was built for the CrossFit Games, but can't see me get into the CrossFit Games. But I do love watching it, and you look at some of the winners, and maybe not in like Matt Frazier, like he's not 6'5".
No, he's like 5'7", I mean, maybe 5'7", 5'8". I mean, most of the guys, I mean, if you look at it, like particularly the young groups, the open class, I mean, they're all, 5'7" to 5'10", and then they're like 180 to 195. I mean, that is the body type that is designed. The multi-purpose can do something at everything.
Mm-hmm.
The nice thing is once you start getting old, I mean, it's just a war of attrition, and the number of guys that aren't falling apart by the time they get over 50 is smaller and smaller. So you have a smaller competitive pool. And, like I said, while I've got some huge disadvantages in many of the events, there's some that I think I could probably just outright destroy pretty everybody else.
Yeah. But that's there's a few things with CrossFit, and I'm like, man, I could hawk that. Like man, I could just destroy this one, but when they go and run that afterwards in the same event, I'm probably not gonna. That's where I lose it. Or when I climb that rope, that's where I lose it. Um, the the idea of going to CrossFit, I had this feeling you had something you were working towards, um, and I just feel like you always have to have something to work toward. And so I was like, he's got something big. So I had to ask. So I appreciate you sharing that with us, and
Sure.
we will be looking for you at the CrossFit Games in 2022. Um, let's move on to, like, you talked a bit about your day, and you're mostly meat. Are you nose to tail? So are you strict nose to tail, or do you
No,
shy
I
away from it?
don't eat any organ meat at all. I shouldn't say any. I mean, I've had it occasionally on time to time when it just presented itself, but I don't go out of my way to eat nose to tail. Um, I know there's some advocates of that. I mean, I've been doing this for a while now, and I've basically talked to people that have been doing it for even much longer than I have. And for the most part, almost all of them don't do that and don't find it necessary. Now, it's not to say that there aren't people that get benefit from doing that way, because clearly there are some people that do that. But I don't necessarily think saying that that is, the way you have to do it, or even the ideal way or optimal way to do it is necessarily grounded in anything more than speculation. It seems to me that what you have behind me, a big hunk of meat, seems to be nutritionally adequate for the vast majority of people. Now, there may be some people that will say, I do better eating, only grass finished meat, or I do better when I include organ meats. And we do see that. And I've literally surveyed the entire carnivore community, or most of it. I did one survey, and within one day I got over 10,000 responses, and, asking them about organ meat consumption. And only about 15% of the people were eating it on any sort of frequent basis, once a week or more. 85% of the people were eating it far less than that, and almost half of them never ate it. So, and that whole cohort was getting good health results. So I'm just, I'm just cautious about trying to say this is how you must do something when we don't know that yet. And so hopefully, as you may be aware, I certainly been talking about the study that's been done with David Ludwig, Belinda Leonard's out of Harvard University, which is ongoing right now, and they're collecting data. That's one of the questions they're going to ask about organ meats and grass finished meat, and what are the results. And as they compile that, that'll make it into the literature, and we'll have probably maybe even a little more clarity on that. But as it stands right now, I'm not opposed to anybody eating them. I just I don't sit down there and fry up a big old liver, or some people like to eat it raw. It just doesn't work for me. I mean, I've tried it to do those things, and I just found no benefit. And there's actually people, quite honestly, that I talked to that said it makes them feel worse. So, I mean, I guess it's fairly individual.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. People struggling, and they're saying they're not, because a lot of people get on to lose weight. There's some serious health benefits, which we'll get into that. I had a friend on earlier, and she has reversed and healed her fibromyalgia. And like, you see all of these huge things reversing, and people are, and then you get people on their side of the fence just looking over and complaining and poking and prodding and trying to pick apart everything. But at the end of the day, we have no idea who's going to live the longest. You said that in when you were on the London Reel, and you're not going to say this is going to make you live the longest, but there's got to be something to it. If you can reverse some things that are ruining your life daily, maybe if it is a shorter life, it's probably a better life. And I don't know if that's ignorant to say it like that, but your lifestyle today, it really matters. And I think that's a huge thing. But getting into the organ meats and eating them raw, that's an extra task for a lot of people that I feel like they just won't do. So I wanted to know if it's something you stuck behind as a staple, and I kind of knew the answer already, but I wanted you to share that. What is your suggestion for someone right now? They have a few health issues. Like, my thing was, I was in the hospital, and high blood pressure just at Christmas time, and I had a bunch of friends in the carnivore diet, and I was like, what do I get to lose? I've been doing this for 3 years, and it's taken me the other way, in a major way. And right now, there's people out there that are having, they're pre-diabetic, they got some blood pressure issues, they got some stuff going on. what what is your suggestion for them if they are going to look at the carnivore diet? Where should they start?
Well, I mean, the first thing I would say is you shouldn't accept that as normal. I mean, you should not have prediabetes. You should not have elevated blood pressure. I mean, none of those things are normal consequences of any aspect of life or aging or any of that. That's just not normal human physiology. So don't accept it. Um, Unfortunately, the medical system largely is just reactionary, and they're just going to say, well, this is a pill you can do to sort of mitigate those symptoms, but not really address why that's occurring. And so I think you need to figure out, a lifestyle strategy that's going to improve that. And whether it's a carnivore diet or some other diet, or, and there's a lot of things that go into this. I don't necessarily say that diet is the only sort of, stone we have to, flip over. But I mean, from the standpoint of would a carnivore diet potentially benefit those people? I would say in many cases, yes. I think there's not a real downside to trying it for, and honestly, I think about a 3 month period of time is sufficient to see if it's going to, have a positive benefit or not. I think shorter than that, it's kind of questionable is if you've given it enough time, just because the adaptation period can be, sometimes even almost that long for some people. Most people it's shorter, but for some people it can take that, 2 months or more. I think that what you pointed out, or you kind of alluded to, is, we don't know what diet can make us live longer. And it may be a carnivore diet makes people live longer. I don't know. I'm not going to say it is, because I don't know, and we'll never know unless we do the right studies, which are, one, cost prohibitive, and two, they're not ethical. And so to do the correct study, you'd have to lock people up in a metabolic ward their whole life, and hopefully they're twins and you've controlled every factor, with the exception of, and diet being the only variable that you're allowed to change. Outside of doing that, we're not going to get the answers we need to know. And so it's all, what we do is we try to utilize lesser science, and particularly epidemiology, which when it comes to nutritional epidemiology, it's just really bad science. And the people that try to draw conclusions from that are really, really stretching things really, really far. And so if we rely on that to sort of dictate what we're going to do the rest of our lives, I think we're going to find many people are going to find that, they do. I mean, they spend most of their life not doing well. And, whether it makes you live an extra 5 years or not, no one will ever know regardless. I mean, because you could drop dead at 90 because you ate, a low fat, quote unquote, whole grain, healthy diet. And, you might eat a meat-based diet and live to 94. I mean, we don't know. We're never going to know that answer. Not even the individual is going to know that answer, because, unless you've got a clone that you can, but we don't have those things. And so I very much think it's important to take people that are, currently diseased, and there's so many of them. I mean, most people, particularly after, say, age 40, have some sort of disease going on, whether they're on a prescription medication or not. They probably have some weight to lose. They probably have joint pain. They probably have some early metabolic syndrome, or if not flat out metabolic syndrome. And so, you can take those people and they're not doing well, or arguably not doing as well as they could be, and move them over to where they're doing better, they're feeling better, things are working better, and your quality of life goes up. And I think that's what it's about. I mean, we want to live, great, we want to live a long time, but who wants to live a long time when your quality of life is not good? And I mean, every person I've seen that's been 100 years old, and this is my skewed perspective, coming to it as an orthopedic surgeon, has been some little old half demented woman laying there in a diaper complaining about her broken hip, and because this is what their existence is. And so it's very rare to see a 100-year-old walking around that's, functioning well and with it mentally, and, really has a good quality of life. And so if living long means I got to spend 20 years in a diaper drooling, I don't want that. I mean, you put me on my misery early.
Yeah,
So I think it's
100% agree with that.
yeah, I mean, I think it's about quality of life, and it's about everything working well. I mean, you should expect your digestion to be perfect without any issues. You should expect your musculoskeletal system to work well. You should be able to walk around and do things without your back hurting, or your knees hurting, or waking up in the morning and you can't walk because you've got plantar fasciitis, or on and on and on. You shouldn't have difficulty breathing. You should have good libido. You should have all of the things that you had when you're 20, when you're 50 or 60 or 70. I mean, I strongly believe that's, not only normal, it's, well, I mean, that's what's supposed to happen. It's pretty uncommon now because, normal is sick, or sick is normal. And, the average person is just sick, and so we kind of come to accept that, oh yeah, that's just normal. That's just the middle-age spread, or that's just that's just typical. You're old. Your joints are supposed to be creaking. Well, I reject that. I don't think that's correct.
Well, we'll a lot of times look at our parents and be like, well, when he was 35, this started happening to him, so I guess it's my time, and then we just accept it. That's and you're saying we shouldn't be accepting it because it is not normal, and a lot of that stuff can be reversed with and the way you live your life. And I mean, training obviously plays a factor, and mindset, and I mean, stress, everything. There's so many levels there, but they all get a piece together. I'm a math guy. I'm analytical. I like to have the data. I track everything that goes on in my world, everything, and write down most of my thoughts. Are you tracking consumption, tracking metrics? Like, what are you focused on, or what are you not focused on?
I don't really like I don't really like to overanalyze, what I eat. It's just, I just view it as another bodily function like breathing and going to the bathroom or anything else. And so, I mean, if I'm hungry, I'm eating. If I'm not hungry, I'm not eating. If it looks good, I mean, in the confines of what I'm eating, it's, I don't really worry too much about it. I'm not super concerned about, my macronutrient ratios. Again, outside, I mean, obviously right now I'm in this kind of special time where I'm actively trying to get leaner. And so I'm doing a little bit more of that, but not really in a general pattern. I tend to track my performance. Again, at the end of the day, what I want to know, what is my goal here? My goal is not to eat a certain way. It's not like my goal is not to be a perfect carnivore or to eat a 80-20 protein, or sorry, fat protein, macronutrient content. My goal is to perform well, to feel good. And so those are the things that I think are more relevant to track. And you could say, well, what's the input? What's the output? But, I generally tend to focus on, at the end of the day, what the results are. So I look at how fast am I? How strong am I? Body composition, those are my actual goals right now. And, you maybe measure, there's some things that you measure from time, your blood pressure, and, sometimes I'll look at a glucose number or something like that. But for the most part, I don't stress so much about those types of things.
I dropped so much muscle in the last 3 years. These weird injuries and stuff like that happening. And so I found when I started, I was packing on, because I was really good at packing on muscle all growing up, and it just seemed to be the last few years it really deteriorated. But I felt good. So like, because I was getting lighter because I didn't have as much muscle, and I was getting these weird injuries from like drinking a 4-liter jug of water that I've done for the last decade. That gave me tennis elbow, like just like really, I got an injury from literally turning. So I look at the start of this. Well, I tracked everything because my body composition spent 6 weeks just changing, but my weight didn't, or sometimes it increased because I upped my activity or whatever. But then my body composition changed so much that it was actually, I'm the size I was when I weighed actually 35 pounds less. But I'm 35 pounds heavier, but my measurements are completely different. And I think that was a positive for me, having that data, because I probably would have gave up earlier. I was like, something's not happening here. And so with that for me, but I keep seeing, don't worry about it. But I find the hardest thing to do, eat enough. And I'm a big guy. Like, I should have no problem eating enough, but since I'm a big guy, I have to eat a lot. And then I add activity to it. It's just, you mentioned before, eating, you got to eat like it's your job. But you have your window in your day that you eat 1 or 2 meals. you're consuming a lot in that one time, eh? Is that to keep up, or do you not worry about the exertion you're putting in your?
Yeah, I mean, I've been doing this for so long. I kind of have a general idea of knowing how much food I need to eat. For me, um, my appetite will respond to the activity level. Like when my training focus gets higher and higher intensity, I just get hungrier, and so I eat a little bit more. I mean, it's just, that's how it should work. You think about a system, if you create a greater demand on the body for fuel, the body should say, I'm hungry, until you meet that demand. And I think when you're providing it the right fuel, there's a pretty nice balance there. And it doesn't take much. You can tweak things a little bit if you want to, but I think that, particularly at steady state, um, you know, it just lines up pretty well. And I think that, um, it's just been such a long time for me now that I just, I know that I have to eat probably, in the neighborhood of 300 grams of protein a day. I mean, and then, I know how much food that is approximately. And some days, I might eat a little more. Some days I might eat a little bit less, depending on, like, well, I really want that. Maybe I'll have 2 steaks instead of 1 or something like that. Or, I might have it thrown a piece of fish on the grill or something like that. But, yeah, I mean, I guess there's a point where once you kind of reach a steady state, this homeostasis, and you get to like this body. I mean, I maintained the same body weight for 10 years. I went from being 280 pounds for 20 years to 240 pounds. And I made that, and I made that change in about 3 months. I dropped, 40, 50 pounds in 3 months, and then just maintained it for 10 years. And so now I'm sort of in again, I'm in this weird time where I'm transitioning down another, 15 pounds or so. So there's a little bit of shift in what I have to do currently. And then once I get down to there, and hopefully maintain that same amount of body weight, maintain as much muscle mass as I can, and just kind of sit there at even leaner than I've been, and I've been pretty lean relatively for the last decade, but I'm going to get a little bit leaner, and then hopefully that'll be my new kind of set point, and you get, once you maintain something for 6 months, your body kind of adapts to that level, and then it just kind of becomes maintenance.
Yeah, you can't. You know what? You're 6'5", so you shouldn't have that much further to go. I'm like, you're not going to get sub 200. Like, it's just not going to happen.
No, I mean, I haven't been, that was, I'm trying to think the last time I was below 200 pounds, it was in high school. So, I mean, that would be,
Yeah, I was 12, I think.
yeah. Yeah.
I'm 6'3", and I've always been a big guy, big set guy. But yeah, it's I couldn't imagine being that. I couldn't imagine being under 200. That's it would be a hard press. So you dropping 15 pounds after watching you work out and the stuff that you do, that you said you dropped the 40 pounds pretty easily, and it looks like you probably are going to have a challenge this last little bit off, because you are pretty lean now. So there's not much to go away, I don't think. But are you choosing,
Yeah, I mean, I don't,
cuts that are leaner?
yeah, a little bit. Yeah. I mean, I don't think I've got more than maybe 3 to 5 pounds of fat on me that I could lose. I mean, and that would put me at an extremely low level of body fat, and, we'll see. I want to, not lose any muscle at all, or minimize any muscle loss. And that's why, I still train hard, and I still, keep that protein intake quite high while I'm doing this.
Yeah. So let's transition a bit to social media. You're heavy on social media. You got your business does wonderful. You have tens of thousands of clients. You have a lot going on. You serve those clients well. I see peeks into that in your day to day. On social media, there's also the haters. There's also a lot of, just social media garbage. Does that weigh on you at all? Like, does it bother you, or do you invite it? Do you like it's, sometimes you're pretty polarizing, so it's almost like you're getting them going anyways. But does it afterwards? Like, some of the stuff they say is pretty brutal. Do you even read it? Do you give it any time at all, or what?
Well, I mean, social media is its own thing for sure. I mean, I realize that, in order to, effectively get the message out, which I want to get out, which is, trying to get people to, take their health seriously, to try maybe a different, strategy than they thought might have been available to them before. To get that message out there, you have to have an audience that will, it'll tune in. And some of that requires, we call it edutainment. You've got to entertain people at the same time you educate them. And so sometimes putting some of the funny, humorous, contentious, controversial content out there, it gets people to, interact, and some of it's negative, some of it's positive, some of it is, a waste of time. But, honestly, at the end of the day, I don't really take myself too seriously on social media. I don't spend a lot of time worrying about it. I mean, it's like, one Instagram post has nothing to do with the next one, for the most part. Every once in a while they'll be connected, but it's just, that sometimes you put something out there and it's received in a way that you didn't intend it to be received. And, people get, people are, you have some people that they're clutching their pearls, or they're the special snowflakes, or they get offended at the slightest thing, or, it's like this stuff with politics or this coronavirus craziness. There's no middle ground on this stuff. I mean, it's such a stark contrast in what people believe. I mean, there's people that are, from on the political side, and I'm very apolitical. I never really sit there and talk about politics. But if I put up a post and it's got something about a Democrat or something about Donald Trump on there, whether it has anything to do with politics, I mean, it's like you bring out the worst of the worst in some people, just because they hate each other and they're screaming, and you get all this just,
Why do you think that is? Why do you think people like so worked up over something so small, and they take it from their perspective and instead of your perspective, and they blow it way out of proportion? Why do you think that happens more now than ever? It's just entitlement, like.
Well, I mean, I think that, one, there's some degree of anonymity of, on social media. A lot of people that don't even have their private accounts or fake names. They just get out there and they just want to, say whatever they want to say. And so, I think there's some of that. I think that a lot of people try to, sort of overlay their thought on what you might be saying, or what they might think you might mean, or they want you to be a certain way. And when your beliefs don't match up with what they believe, then sometimes they get very offended. They're like, well, because you feel this way about nutrition, then obviously you must feel this way about politics or some other thing. When you don't feel that way, or you don't sort of immediately buy into that, people get kind of offended because they want you to be this perfect. If you've got 100,000 followers, all 100,000 of them want you. The reason they follow you is because they agree with you, and they want to agree with you on everything, or they want you to agree with them more likely than not. It's kind of frame of reference. Well, look, he said this, and I think he's smart on this, and therefore he must believe in this as well. He must believe that we didn't land on the moon, or the Earth is flat, or vaccines are bad, or whatever the topic is. It's kind of
Well, it's funny. I consider myself a conspiracy enthusiast, so I wouldn't say I'm a conspiracy theorist, but I do love hearing all the different perspectives. And this time that we're in right now has been feeding the conspiracy theorists on many different levels. But I find even entertaining the thoughts of things that are like actual facts that are coming out from these studies and reports that are going on, and what was typically mainstream media is now being dubbed fake news because they're not falling into line, because they're following a trail that they're trying to keep putting the clues together, and that trail doesn't align with the CDC and the politics and that. And when that comes out, it's just creating this mass chaos. And I had someone on a post. She was talking about her autoimmune diseases and stuff, and I was just nicely saying, "Do you know what? some people are having some benefits from the carnivore diet. I'm not saying to go just start eating meat, but you might want to do your own research, because maybe you can reverse one of those. Maybe you can have a better life. Like, and I kept it really light and just said, go on your own personal journey. That's pretty much what I said. And I had like 10 people like, are you trying to kill her? And they took it as me trying to like, that I wanted her dead because I offered that. And then I was like, how did that go from, I was trying to be helpful to flying off the handle. And I look at some of the people, do you ever worry about the threats and stuff that they like have actually being valid, or something to be worried about? Have you ever had to arm yourself against threats? Has that happened, or you just take it with a grain of salt that they're keyboard warriors?
Yeah, I mean, I think more of the latter than anything. I've never, I guess, in the whole time I've been doing this, and as I've gotten sort of more and more visible, and people have recognized me, I've had people on the street come up to me and say, "Hey, I recognize you," and we have a little conversation, and they've always been, uh, polite. They've always been friendly. They've usually agreed with what I had to say. I've only run into one vegan that I actually talked to, and I'm fine. And this was a physician in Malaysia when I was presenting there, and I was doing a talk on carnivore diets and its benefits. We had a nice chat, but I mean, I've never had, and I'm sure I've seen vegans. If I go to Whole Foods, I'm in Southern California, I go to Whole Foods. I know that I've seen some that probably have recognized me, and as the evil guy, but they've never come up and said anything to me. I
The
don't know.
evil guy.
Maybe my physical stature scares them away or something. But I mean, I think most of them in real life are nothing like what they would represent themselves on what they do on social media. I mean, you'd hope not, because if that was the way people were in real life, they would quickly find that you know, they wouldn't do well with in-face interactions, I think.
Yeah, throwing down in Whole Foods, you have to, you're having a food fight in the middle of Whole Foods. Well, I think that's kind of moving us into today. The COVID-19, there's a lot of stuff going on out there. You're a physician. What is your feelings based on, we won't go too far into this, but what is your feelings on how strict we're being and the math behind how virulent the disease is? Like, do you think we're being proactive? Do you think this is the right move, or should we just let it run its course?
Well, I mean, I think probably in retrospect, we'll find out that we probably did some things wrong. I mean, whether too strict or not strict enough, I mean, I think that's still yet to be determined. I think the more this goes on, the more data we have, it looks like it's less and less problematic than we might have once thought it was. I mean, particularly as we see probably more and more people have already had that and have been completely asymptomatic. And so I think, if I were in charge, and there's no ever reason to think I would be, but if I was, I mean, we might have been better, with isolating those at risk, um, and rather than potentially arguably wrecking the entire economy, which is certainly something that may happen. If we've got, food supply falling apart, people going out of business, just food rotting, animals perhaps having to be euthanized. I think those things may have been avoided. I don't know that anyone knows. I mean, I know there's a lot of people that want to speculate on this, and there's a lot of people out there, well, you're not an expert in this or that. And then even when you talk to people that are, quote, virologists or experts or epidemiologists, they don't agree. There's wildly different opinions on this stuff. There's guys like John Anitis, who's, one of the most respected epidemiologists, public health guys in the country, saying, it's probably been an overreaction. And yet there's other people, obviously, guys like Fauci and some of the other ones would go very much the other way. So who's a respected authority on this? Who's not? Who do we trust? Who do we don't? I don't know. I mean, I certainly am not going to put myself out there as some expert. I think like all things, like most things, in the middle of a crisis, it's tough. I mean, it's, there's no real way, there's no winning strategy on any of these things, outside of, I mean, what was the guy that crashed the plane and landed it on the ice, the captain, that's a crisis, and he came out of it, pretty lucky. But, arguably the plane shouldn't have crashed in the first place. And so there's probably people that got fired over that part of it. So it's, you know, like I said, I think one thing is clear to me is that when we look at the people that are being affected by it, the people that are, becoming critical and some of them dying, the vast majority of them are sick already. They're either very, very elderly or they have significant underlying comorbidities. And, we hear about, there's been a few young, healthy people that have died. That's fine too. I mean, that's a fact, but that doesn't discount the fact that the majority of the people are, either obese or metabolically unhealthy or have underlying cardiovascular disease or respiratory disease. And those things are largely preventable. And we should be, looking at that significantly, going forward. If we're going to worry about recurrences of pandemic or even the same strain of a virus coming back next year, maybe we shouldn't have so many people that are at risk and avoidably at risk. And hopefully that will be something that, comes out of this.
Hate for someone to step in now and do it because they'd probably do the wrong things. But do you feel like they should start outlawing certain things to make sure that we reverse this? Because people can't control their own decisions. Should the government be making decisions on food consumption and what they're having? And no, I don't believe they should be doing it now because I don't like what they want us to eat. But as we progress, do you think they should step in at some point and try to get rid of the sugars and get rid of the good carbs?
Well, I don't know that we should outlaw foods. I mean, I think that's a slippery slope. I do think that we maybe should not incentivize certain foods. I mean, we have. I think we subsidize cheap garbage food. I mean, through our grain subsidies. I mean, ultimately, and whether that's fed and turned into Doritos and junk food, or and fed to cattle. I think we should stop at those subsidies. We should subsidize nutritious food, and then let the market dictate what happens from there. And then hopefully we can educate people on better dietary choices. I mean, I think that the diet guidelines, unfortunately, are not helpful. I think that if we were to just say, look, stop eating this junk food, and our dietary guidelines, we would do much better. And, hopefully, the consumer demand would be such that, I guess you first have to have a populace that actually cares about their health. And so that's one assumption that is not necessarily going to play out, because I look around and obviously people don't care because they're they wouldn't be in the state they're in if they cared. In a lot of cases, they're just
It would mean mental health.
Yeah, I mean, there's you go out in public and you're like, wow, look at all these people that are clearly. Whenever I go to the grocery store, it's like I look in people's cart and I see a bunch of junk food and I see maybe a couple oranges and an egg or two. And I'm like, you've got, a little bit of nutrition, mostly garbage. And, it's no wonder you've got, your kids are already obese at 7 years of age. And, it's just unfortunate.
I was in the grocery store once and I almost fought this lady. She was with her kid in front of me and the kid brought up this banana and said, "Can I have this banana?" And she said, no, put that back. She just had one banana. And then she continued to ask for a pack of Belvedere Light. like she told the kid to put the banana back so she could get her cigarettes. And I couldn't say nothing. At that point, I was like, I had to say something. This was a few years ago. I was young and I just couldn't believe it. And in another scenario, like my father-in-law, he's battled certain health things over his life, but he's stubborn. And we go down to Disney, and he doesn't want to take one of those scooters. And I'm like, everybody drives these scooters here. Like everybody does. I'm not walking 20 kilometers today with you. Like you're going to get these scooters because I don't want to wait. And he wouldn't do it. He was against it. We got about 20 feet into the park, and like the flying V, there was like a family of 7 from ages
8 and up, huge, driving these scooters and just taking over a whole bunch of space. And he looked at them, he goes, those are kids driving those. I'm like, yes, everybody's driving those. Now you're going to get one. And he ended up getting one because he felt better because the populace was doing it, but he actually needed it. Like, he actually had some ailments that required him to drive it. And then I was looking at these kids and I was like, that's not good. Like, they're not, this might be their last time going to Disney World. And they don't even know it. And I just don't know how we get so far from that. And I know I've had my own struggles, so I don't know how we get so intertwined. Do you feel like it's an addiction? Do you feel like there's something chemical, like a chemical reaction to triggers or anything like that, or just we are over consumers?
Well, I mean, I think, it lends itself to overconsumption for sure. I mean, the studies looking at sort of ultra processed food, mixing, refined, sugar and fat and grains together it's just so easy to overconsume them. And so, I mean, and I do think there's clear studies that show that when we look at the brain neurochemistry that occurs when we consume things like sugar, yeah, I mean, it does kind of lead into an addictive type of pattern of eating. And so, sure, for sure, yeah, absolutely, there are people that are just their source of comfort is food. It's not about nutrition anymore. It's about psychological well-being, albeit temporary. It's about, emotional eating. It's about entertainment. It's about boredom. It's about, then there's a cultural pressure and the marketing pressure and the fact that they know how to design food that we have a hard time not eating. And so there's all of that's overlaid. And so that's one of the reasons unique about this carnivore diet, because you basically have to eliminate all those things, completely.
It makes it easy. It makes it really easy.
Yeah, that's what a lot of people say.
I was like, you know what, I'm feeling a little craving today, so I'm going to have some bacon. And to me, bacon was like having a chocolate chip cookie, right? Like, it was like, all right, and then I was done. I didn't need it. But the more I eat, the more I lose. And that's weird thing, because I'm like, when I go stagnant, it's because I'm not eating enough to match how much I'm putting out. And so I'm driving home food like I have not driven before. And then I might not be hungry for 30 hours. Like, I might not eat for a couple of days, or I might not eat till the next night or anything. Does that happen to you? Do you ever go on multi-day fast, or do you just kind of stick to that same sort of schedule?
Not typically multi-day, but I mean, there's definitely times when I'll go more than 24 hours without hunger, and then I don't eat. It depends on how hard I'm training. If I'm training pretty hard, then I'm usually going to be hungry. And so, but
Yeah.
if there's a time where I just, went out and gorged, and ate too much, I may not want to eat for 24 hours. I mean, that does happen for sure.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I really appreciate having you on here tonight. I think a lot of people are going to learn a lot. They're going to go on their own personal journeys. I shared this to a few places, and I want to say I appreciate your time. And if anyone has any comments or questions, you can send me a message and I'll connect with Shawn, and maybe we can connect you guys. He is the CEO of Meet RX, and it's a wonderful program, and there's so many life-changing stories in there that it's hard to even dispute what he's saying. And like I said, if it's going to improve your life, then why not try it and just see what it is for you. So make sure you go on, check it out. If you want more information, it's easy. It's Dr. Shawn Baker. You put that into YouTube. There's endless content there for you to consume. And I appreciate your time. So I'm going to go offline, and you stay on here for a sec, and I'll just have a talk with you, okay?